Hi, good morning. So I am starting off in the morning taking a look around my garden, pretty much just to see what I see. I may have neglected to mention that really the most important thing you can do as a gardener, as an environmentalist, is to be observant. So it's to have your eyes open, to go outside and to look around and to see what you see, to ask questions and to see if you can find the answers if you have a question that needs answering. So I'm in this pot right here. I have a combination of some flowers, and in the back, it's not a pot, it's like one of those fabric bags. I planted a watermelon, and I planted it so that it would grow up this little wooden thing that I took from a plant that I bought once. It came with that. And then I put some string, which I attached to a structure. It's like an archway that goes around the entrance to my garden. And I attached some string so that the watermelon would have something to attach to. And so you can see there's two watermelon plants. And this one has a flower and a little baby watermelon, so cute. And one of the watermelons is sticking out a little bit. So I am just going to gently tuck it in to this string and encourage it now to be upright. So often, human gardeners try to make the garden work for them in different ways. So in nature, a watermelon might grow in the ground and sprawl out into the lawn, but I want to be able to walk on my lawn and mow my lawn. I have a very little bit of lawn here. This is it. This is the lawn. So this is going to grow up, and maybe it'll grow. I don't know how high it will grow. We'll see. But this watermelon, because it's not sitting on the ground where it usually would be growing if the plant was sprawling, will probably, once it gets heavy, need to be supported so it doesn't fall down. So again, when I come out in the garden, I'm just looking around to see what's what. So here's a tomato. This is one of the tomatoes. You guys might have one of these. This does not look like a sun gold, which is what we told you you had. This looks like a much larger tomato. So it is certainly possible that some of the tomatoes were improperly labeled. And so you'll have to, again, if it's not a teeny tiny, so let's over here, I planted, and this tomato also doesn't look like a sun gold. All right, so these were tomatoes. So if you have little cherry-sized tomatoes, I'll show you some sun golds in the back. All right, so this is just an overview. This is my backyard garden. I have an archway that is actually supported. There's pots on a lot of pots in places where I couldn't dig into the soil for various reasons. I have fabric growing bags. I have, and then this area is the in-ground area. And it's about, I'd say, 22 feet in this direction, and then back to front, it's probably about 30 feet. So it's not small, it's not big. It's a good in-between size. It's about half of my backyard. So I have around the edges, I have fabric pots. I have some raised beds. I have a little mini high tunnel where I start my seeds and keep them fresh. Keep them, when in the early spring when it's cold, it keeps them warm. This is a patch of asparagus, which is now just ferns. In the back, there's a fig. And so we'll just take a quick look around at, this is a bed full of lettuce. This is just a container. You can see it, just like a plastic container that I put a piece of brown paper left over from a shopping bag. Then I covered it with leaves, and then I put a thin layer of soil, and I've been growing lettuce in there. This is a chamomile patch. Again, these are pots that have herbs. This is a metal basket that I found that I put a piece of burlap in the bottom, and I threw some soil in. I planted a few potatoes, which are growing. So I come out and I look and I say, oh, these potatoes, the leaves are looking a little sad. And then I try to think, why would that be? Did they get too much water or not enough water? Is there an insect that's damaging them? I see some evidence on the leaves of damage. So right now I'm just doing observations, and if I don't know the answer, I may have to go inside and do some research. You look on the underside of leaves, which tells you a lot. I see similar damage on this plant here, which is called a ground cherry. It's an unusual plant that makes like a little husk like a tomatillo, but it's sweeter. All right, so we'll come in here. So this is my, these are some cabbage plant family plants. And these plants have quite a few holes in their leaves. And I have been coming out here and inspecting, looking for the caterpillars, which generally are what cause these kinds of this kind of damage. And I have not. So I see these white spots on the back side. I have yet to find, so there's these white moths, they're called cabbage moths, and they lay eggs, and then those eggs hatch and become caterpillars, and those caterpillars tend to make their way to cabbage plants and then chew up the leaves. But I have yet to see a cabbage, and usually the caterpillars are green and they're kind of hard to see because they look a lot like cabbage. And I have been looking and I have not found one yet. But clearly somebody's eating big holes in these cabbage leaves. That said, the leaves are perfectly edible and delicious. And this crop, this is kohlrabi, same family. You can see the leaves have some damage, but not nearly as much. The collards have the most damage. Interesting. So here I have peppers. Some of you were growing pepper plants. This is a pepper flower. I think we have some peppers forming down here. Here we go. Here's some small peppers forming. So I put the sweet peppers that I'm growing in one section, and I put the hot peppers that I'm growing in a different section so I don't get confused later when I'm harvesting. This is basil, growing nicely. These are tomatoes, larger tomatoes. So again, I'm just looking to see what I see. Tomatoes look like they're doing fine. I see where the flowers were. Some of them are forming fruits. One thing I do know is that when it gets very hot, like it has been, the flowers don't necessarily get pollinated. So in this case, this is where flowers had been. The flowers seem to have fallen off. That's what the flower looks like. So this is what it looks like maybe a week later. This is what it looks like when the flower has been pollinated and a fruit starts to form. So once it gets very hot, pollination doesn't happen. So we'll have to wait until it cools off a little bit for more tomatoes to form. But we have some tomatoes that are probably a week and a half ago, and they are filling out nicely. These are, again, you can see there's different, each tomato variety looks slightly different at the ripening stage and at the I am ripe stage. Some tomatoes actually are ripe when they're green, some tomatoes are ripe when they're yellow. We're mostly familiar with tomatoes that are ripe when they're red. There's different shapes. This is sort of the shape of a paste tomato. It's got square shoulders. The shoulders are this top part. You can see the remnant of the flower on the bottom. So when you see these flowers, so you can see these flowers here, if they get pollinated, a fruit will form. It's a little bit cooler today, so maybe some of these will pollinate. So all these flowers are potentially going to be fruit. Tomatoes, turns out, are self-pollinating, meaning that they don't need to have a male flower and a female flower like squash plants do, because the pollen is in the same flower, can get right into the ovary of this flower and make a fruit.